The X Zone Radio Show is heard on radio broadcast affiliates worldwide, including
AM 580 CFRA in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
WPUL AM 1590 in Daytona Beach, Florida.
KOHI AM 1610 in St. Helens, Oregon.
KHRO AM 1150 in El Paso, Texas. And for more information on becoming a professional broadcast affiliate of the X Zone Radio Show, visit
www.xzbn.net
or call toll-free worldwide
1-800-610-7035.
The X Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. 1-800-610-7035 is toll-free worldwide. My email address, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Lori Cartagena. And she's joining us all the way from Australia this afternoon, where it, I believe, is just shortly 10 minutes past the hour of 6 tomorrow, Friday, August the 13th. Lori, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Lori, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, well, I've had a very, very interesting life. I have actually lived in Canada. I lived in Toronto for some time, and I also lived in Montreal for some time, and I spent a couple of months in Vancouver, and a total of about 14 years in America itself. And but I'm originally from Brisbane, Australia. If anybody knows where Brisbane is, it's right at the base of the Great Barrier Reef. And I currently live here now also. So it's I've done a sort of a round, big circle, you know, it's like the circle of life.
Lori, you're the author of The Heartbreak Option. It's an inspiring true story. When did you write The Heartbreak Option?
I wrote the book about less than 4 years ago. Just over 3 years ago, I started writing it, and it was actually published last year in June. And I've been having a tremendous success with it here in Australia. It's been absolutely fantastic because it's just come at the right time. At the moment, there's a lot of television programs on. One was started here in Australia called Find My Family. And it's not that show that inspired my story. In fact, I started writing my book before that show even came about.
All right, Lori, you and I have to take a commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Exo Nation, our very special guest of this hour is Lori Cartagena, and her website is www.loridcartagena.com. I'm going to spell that for you, LORIDCARTAGENA.com. And I'll do that one more time, LORIDCARTAGENA.com. And Lori and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break in 2 minutes as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. 1-800-610-7035, toll-free worldwide. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, xzoneradiotv.com. We'll be back in 2. Don't go away. Exo Nation, Lori Cartagena. I'm sorry, Lori. How do you pronounce it?
You'll have trouble with that.
Yeah, I am.
Just say Cartagena. Makes it easier.
All right, Cartagena. Welcome back to the X Zone, Lori. Tell me, Lori, what was the inspiration for writing your book, The Heartbreak Option?
Well, in 2005, I got a phone call out of nowhere from a private investigator in Melbourne informing me that my birth son that I had given up for adoption 35 years earlier was trying to find me. The most amazing thing about this was that it was the day after Mother's Day 5 years ago. I had been thinking extremely strongly about him and about, making further attempts to find him also. And the most amazing thing about that was the Thursday before that, I was out walking with a girlfriend. I do a lot of walking. And I've known her for many, many years. And I finally told her that I had another son. She only knew of my younger son, Chris. And as I found out later, after my birth son and I actually did communicate, he had been out with a friend on the same Thursday. I was in Brisbane. He was in Venice Beach, California, telling his friend he was going to make one last attempt to find his birth mother. And he then called 3 private investigators in Melbourne, and within 1 hour, I had a PI on the phone calling me in my home, telling me my birth son was looking for me. I nearly fell over backwards. 5 weeks later, my son came out. He flew out to Brisbane, and we met for the very, very first time.
What was it like meeting your son after all these years?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It was just incredible. It was so incredible. The whole journey of even leading up to all of this, I had to write the book. And the book actually starts in Brisbane and it ends in Brisbane. It starts at the Brisbane International Airport. It ends at the Brisbane International Airport. But then it flashes to all of the other events that have actually led up to that particular moment.
Going back to 1970, Lori, how difficult was giving up your son?
It is probably the most difficult thing a woman ever has to do, to make that choice. But at that time, I was just turned 20 years of age. I was in the US without any legal documentation. I had very little money. I had just returned from a 14-month stint as an entertainer in Vietnam, and during the war that was. And, after I was living in Toronto, and I had a very, very brief romance, ended up in Florida for numerous reasons that are actually in the book, and then and discovered I was pregnant. So I really had to make that decision, the decision that was best for really both of us, but mostly for my child.
How did you end up being in Vietnam for the troops?
Well, as a young girl, I was an entertainer here. I always danced and sang from a very, very young age. I was involved in musicals here at a very young age. I did The Boyfriend, Paint Your Wagon, a few other musicals as well. And I really had this flair for entertainment. And I went down to Sydney from Brisbane at the age of 17, just after high school, actually. And I was actually employed by an American entrepreneur who was putting bands together to go over to Vietnam. He actually already had a group performing in Da Nang, and he needed me to join the show to fill in for one of the girls who was actually leaving. So I ended up there for 14 months. I did 3 different shows, and I ended up becoming a booking agent for a Filipino group when I was just 19.
Wow. So how did you end up in Florida?
Well, I fell madly in love with a GI who lived in Wisconsin. I traveled to Wisconsin. We were going to be married. That's a long, long story. I decided that I really could not marry somebody that was, he was a bit older than I was, but also he was going to be a forest ranger, and we were just very different. Life was different. So from there, I went on to Toronto, and I escaped the Toronto winter in December during the school vacation. I was teaching ballroom dancing, actually, in Toronto. I was a professional ballroom dancer. Also, I did 5 years professional ballroom dancing years ago when I was here in Australia. And so when I decided to go to Florida with a girlfriend whose parents lived down there to get away from the cold Toronto freezing winter.
Smart lady.
Get some sun.
Smart lady.
Well, I was pretty young, but that seemed the thing to do. And, of course, I fell in love with Florida, and I decided to stay. But about two and a half months later, I realized that I was pregnant.
So why?
And I stayed.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, dear.
No, and I did stay. And friends of mine that I had met introduced me to an attorney who specialized in adoptions. And that's when I, decided, I made the decision that was going to be really my only recourse. Coming from a religious background, going home pregnant just was not an option.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, after you had your son and, you gave him up for adoption, is that when you decided to go back to Australia?
Oh, no, I didn't go back to Australia till the first time was 1983. This was in 1970. I spent many years. I was living in New York. And in fact, in 1976, I was living 3 blocks from my son in East Brunswick, New Jersey.
How ironic is that? It seems like you two have been shadowing yourself throughout his life.
Well, in 2003, I actually lived in Los Angeles for 5.5 years. And both my sons now live in Los Angeles. My other younger son has just spent 2 years in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. I spent time in Vancouver. There's just like, when you talk about 6 degrees of separation, it is eerie. In 2004, I actually walked past my son's office building and his unit on Washington Boulevard in Venice Beach, not knowing that he was there. And 1 year later, he contacted me.
Coincidence? I think not.
I think not. There has been too many of them, too many. When we spoke on the phone, and he is so much alike like me, it is incredible. He was an entertainer during the time that he was studying at USC. He's an attorney. He has his own law firm. He, was nearly made a decision to become an entertainer. He didn't understand where he came from, who he was, why he had jet black hair when, he didn't look anything like his family. Mm-hmm. Now I've written that book in a way for him because he now knows who he is. He knows where his roots are. And the genetics are just incredible. The biological, alliance is amazing.
How did he find out he was adopted?
He always knew. His parents always told him that. But he had a very tragic life. Here's another coincidence for you. In 1974, his first adopted mother, Ruth, died of cancer.
Oh, heavens.
In that same year, my first husband was killed. And then in 1976, I happened to be living in New York, and I moved to East Brunswick, New Jersey, staying with a girlfriend, and I was just 3 blocks from his house.
And how old would he have been at this time?
6. He would have been 6 years old.
Who knows? He may have passed him on the street.
I could have seen
or
him.
In the
he
mall.
Could have been playing in the front yard. Right. I don't know. Yeah. Who would know? I wouldn't have known. I'd just see a little boy, Mm-hmm. He wouldn't have known I was his mom.
What was your first reaction when you picked up the phone and the private investigator told you that your son, after all these years, was trying to make contact with you?
Well, I was very skeptical at first, I mean, my questions was, where was he born? When was he born? What's his birth date? I mean, I just was in shock. It's just, but yet it had been in my mind because I had actually contacted, through internet. Internet is just an amazing, amazing thing. I don't know how we ever did without it. I had actually gone onto a group called Adoptions Reunite and put some information in there, hoping that I could find something, because I didn't know anything about him, his name. The records were sealed. Mm-hmm. But my son is such a clever, clever man. He actually was looking for me for 10 years. And he actually employed a private investigator and she's actually from Florida, and she herself specializes in reuniting people. But she searched for me for 10 years and couldn't find me because I had, relocated to Australia in 1983. And even though I'd been back to the States for nearly a year in between then and as well as other times visiting, I hadn't actually worked there or used my Social Security or done anything. So I'd sort of disappeared. So I was impossible to track down.
So he comes to Brisbane, and what was it like seeing him for the first time after all these years? Oh,
I hugged him and kissed him, and and in fact my first words to him was, "You came out of my body." It's like a crazy thing to say, but I said that, and he put his arms around me, said, "Yes, my beautiful mum, I did."
What a story.
It was just precious.
You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Please stand by. Exonation. Our special guest is Lori Cartagena, or Cartagena, right? Cartagena?
Right.
There you go.
Right. Oh, you got it.
Got it. And we're talking about a book that she wrote that is entitled The Heartbreak Option, an Inspiring True Story. www.loricartagena.com, and that's LORIDCARTAGENA.com. And Lori and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. 1-800-610-7035 is worldwide toll free. And we're featuring people this week and last week who've gone out of their way to make something happen that mainstream media really just hasn't picked up on. So to all the guests that we've had this week and last week, thank you very much for sharing your stories with everyone here in the X Zone around the world. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Hi, this is Eric Rawls of Cosmoverse.com, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X Zone.
Hi, this is Blade Runner, and you are listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Hi, I'm Laura Sabrin of Cease to Fields Organic Vineyard in Jordan, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Hi, my name is Lady Ashley, the White Witch of Niagara-on-the-Lake, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal talk radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to The X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Exo Nation, Lori Cartagena is our special guest to this hour. She's the author of The Heartbreak Option, an inspiring true story. It's available at Amazon.com. Lori, as you were writing the book, did you end up reliving your life, and did regret set in at any time?
Well, I wouldn't say regret, because I've had a really, really amazingly interesting life. And I mean, a lot of things have just happened, you know, I mean, I can't explain it. I just seem to have been in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time at times. But I can't say regrets. In fact, there were so many happy moments, and there was a lot of sad moments. I mean, I was in Florida, actually. I moved back to Canada, and I was living in Toronto. No, I think I was living in Montreal at that time. And I actually went down to Florida and stayed at the Playboy Plaza. And it was actually Stephen's first birthday, my son's birthday. And I actually had to leave Florida. I was so upset. So there were moments when there were regrets. But the book was wonderful. I wrote it like I was reliving that my whole life. And it was so interesting because so many wonderful memories came flooding back, and interesting memories. And by the way, it is Stephen's 40th birthday tomorrow.
Wow.
He is born on August the 14th. What a coincidence.
Well, happy birthday, Stephen.
I hope he will listen into this, because I've got some special things to say to him. I'll be speaking to him, and both my sons, I'll be celebrating it together. So it was wonderful. No, but I can't say that I've got a lot of regrets, because, you know, whatever you do in life, it takes you to the next part of your journey. So how can you regret it?
What would you like readers to find in your book once they finish? What message would you like them to take home with them?
Never give up your dreams. Never, you know, like whatever happens, it happens for a reason. And you know, I really believe that a good comes out of everything. And one of the things that I wanted to write with this book is that I have met so many people in the meantime who are either searching for their biological families, like their parents, or mothers who sort of are concerned about, they're full of guilt about giving up their child. But back in those days, in 1970, there was no aid for a single mum. And in some countries, it was actually looked down upon. In Australia, I mean, it was not a very good thing. It was a pretty stigmatized situation to be, you know, an unwed mother, so to speak. And I mean, today it's nothing unusual.
It's commonplace.
So
yeah.
it is. But back then, you know, it just wasn't. I mean, it wasn't the done thing, really. And there was no financial aid. And I didn't know anything about getting child support. And I was too embarrassed and humiliated to even let anybody in Canada know that this particular man had fathered my child.
Why?
It was actually not. He was my student. He was my dance student. He was quite a bit older than I was. He was a widower, and he was a very charming man. He was a lovely man. Look, I can't say anything, but it only happened. It was one night, and it shouldn't have happened. A few too many wines. What can I say? Young girl.
Yeah.
He was very attracted to me, and he should have known better. Really.
But on the other hand,
I have a beautiful son as a result.
Exactly.
And I couldn't be prouder.
What are people saying about your book, the people who have had the opportunity of reading it?
They love it. They absolutely love it. I have had so much, people email me that I don't even know and just say, Laurie, I couldn't put the book down. It was just absolutely amazing. I couldn't wait to get home from work to read, the next part of it, because it doesn't stop. It keeps going through really 35 years, but even more than that, because there's a bit of a family background in there as well. I've put a bit of history in it. I mean, even things like when my flight over to the US in July was the flight that was a specially chosen Qantas flight, and we actually witnessed the splashdown of the capsule from the Apollo 11. So I'm flying over, watching the first men in the moon landing in the Pacific Ocean. I mean, things like this continually happen in my life and my stories. So the stories, even though it's mostly about my son and I, there's many, many other interesting things in there. I've done 4 chapters on my tours of Vietnam and what it was like over there as an entertainer. And then there's much more. There's, my journeys throughout the United States and how I finally got back to Australia and what I did here. And I was a single mum also. So my book has now gone into the book club for a major single mums magazine down in Melbourne, Australia. It's been put in there. I have a distributor here, and they love my book. They've reviewed it, and so it's moving in a lot of different directions at the moment.
Prior to writing your book that we're talking about this hour, The Heartbreak Option, have you written other books as well?
I've not written any other books, but I've done a lot of writing. I was a trainer, teacher, lecturer in the beauty industry, and I wrote all my own modules, and I did a lot of lectures. And I wrote for a magazine many, many years ago called Reshaped. I did some editorials on that. I've always had a bit of a flair. I've done a lot of creative writing courses, and I've written short stories, but not published anything. No, this was my first published work.
Is this going to be your last?
I doubt it. I've got some ideas. I'm ready for another one. I've been researching another story for a bit.
What would you like
and a true story as well.
What would you like to tell people who are listening to us tonight? If they have a story inside of them, how would they go about doing what you did, getting it out?
Well, I was actually encouraged. I had a 2-page article in the Woman's Day here in Australia. And I've had many, many media articles. And the Alan Veitch, who actually is a professional author himself, when he got to know me and found out more about my life, he was the one who said to me, Laura, you got to write a book. And I said, oh, okay, all right, I'll write a book. Because at that time, I wasn't working. Mm-hmm. I had contracted a horrible disease called, I think you call it West Nile. It was Ross River here.
Oh, my gosh.
And, it knocked me around a little bit. So I had some time on my hands. And I came up with the idea originally, before I wrote the book, I did actually a treatment for a play. And, then I thought, well, that's no good. I really need to do a book. So I did the first and last chapter of the book, and then it just flowed.
Laurie, are you there? Well, it seems that we've lost Laurie. We're going to try and get her back. XO Nation, my name is Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. 1-800-610-7035 is our toll-free number, and we have Laurie back. I thought maybe you decided, hey, the sun looks great, Laurie. You were going to head to the beach on us.
No, we just got cut off. Sorry.
Well,
I don't know what happened.
You're back. That's the main thing. And you were telling us just before we lost you about writing.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So it flowed very easily for you. But over the years, talking to authors, as I have done, there's always been one part of their book that was the hardest chapter for one reason or another. What was that chapter in your book?
Well, the only chapter I had to get a lot of information from was this. It's called Stephen's story. And I had to decide how I was going to do that very, very tactfully because of the fact that his mother had died, his first mother, his adopted mum. But I actually started it, and Stephen was raised Jewish, and I started it at a Jewish funeral in New York. And I sort of went into what had happened, and it described, how young Ruth had been sort of cut down at the prime of her life. She was only 33 when she passed away. And, how it affected Stephen and his adopted dad at that time. And also, so that was probably the hardest. I had to do quite a bit of research on exactly how a Jewish funeral is conducted. And I found it extremely interesting, to be quite honest. So I love doing research. That was probably the only challenging story I had, and was sometimes getting information out of Stephen that he had to come up with. And his parents helped me out as well, because we've actually met, spent time together, and we love each other to death. So we have this wonderful extended family right now. But the book itself, the hardest part was editing it and getting it right.
What would you say to people who are listening who want to find someone? Now, isn't there always the chance that the other person does not want to be found? And what do you do if that's the case?
Well, I've come across quite a few people that I've spoken to like that, and I've actually convinced people to go for it. I said, look, if you get rejected, well, that's really too bad. That's sad on their part, because, you are a biological part of each other's, lives. But I just, tell people, look, it can be the most beautiful ending. It's not even an ending. I've called it the beginning. When I finished my book, my last chapter, it is the end and the beginning. It is not the end or the beginning. It is just, it's like a whole new life, like a whole new start. And it can be just so rewarding. And I'm just encourage people, look, open your hearts. Mums, don't feel the guilt. Just let it go. If your child wants to find you, it's so important to them. I realized how important it was to Stephen. His search for me for 10 years, never gave up. And in fact, when in 2005, he had made a decision that he didn't think he was ever going to find me. And it was his last chance. It was, he was going to give it one last opportunity. And it worked. He found me. The energy between us was so strong, from country to country, from Australia to LA, to America, that it was meant to happen. It was meant to be. And if it's meant to be, you got to let it be.
But are there cases out there where children do not know that they are adopted? And would this not crush a child who is now an adult, who believes in their heart of hearts that their mom and dad are their mom and dad?
Absolutely. And, the thing is, too, a lot of children think, oh, she didn't want me. They didn't want me. But they don't realize the circumstances before that, that it's not that easy. It's not an easy decision. It's not, that decision. And a lot of young girls in the past didn't even have a choice in some countries. So babies were just taken away from them. They were too young and they were just given away. And that was the end of it, never to be seen again, so to speak. But I did make my own choice because I believed it was the right thing to do for my son. And he understands that. Do you know, the first conversation we had, I tried to explain. I said, Stephen, look, I want you to know I never wanted to give you up for adoption. It was, I just, I had to. And he said, Mum, I understand. And he was so wonderful about it. I had to love it. I loved him that instant. And I never stopped loving him. But getting to know him as a person and finding out what a wonderful human being he's grown up to be, I feel very blessed. And I am so thankful to those wonderful people who gave him that life that perhaps I couldn't have done, And he now, from writing the book, understands what I was going through at that time and why I made that decision.
What does Stephen think about the book?
He likes it. He thinks it's great. He's very impressed. He didn't want me to divulge too much of his personal life in it, which I didn't.
Yeah.
It's just really about us finding each other and how he was raised and the circumstances leading up to it, and just like our own personal little tragedies and the finding of each other, which was just been marvelous. We've spent quite a lot of time together. In fact, I just spent my very first Mother's Day with him in Los Angeles this May, and with both my sons together, which was just wonderful. And Stevie Wonder was the guest appearance.
Wow.
He's come up and sang me Happy Mother's Day at the House of Blues. How about that?
Can't beat that. You really can't.
Can't beat that.
Lori,
Best Mother's Day ever.
Lori, stand by. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. Exonation, if you'd like to get a copy of Lori's book, it's entitled The Heartbreak Option, An Inspiring True Story. It's available at Amazon.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we do our wrap-up for tonight here on the X Zone. And if you'd like to find out more about Lori, here's her website. I'm going to spell it out. www.loridcartagena.com. And Lori and I will return on the other side of this commercial break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. This is a story that I'm glad she told. Exonation, Lori Cartagena has been my guest this hour. Lori is the author of The Heartbreak Option, An Inspiring True Story. It's available at Amazon.com. And if you'd like to learn more about Lori, www.loridcartagena.com. Lori, as I said to you during the commercial break, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show. And you know what? You resonate, Mom.
I am a mom. I love my boys. They are just two superhuman beings, and I feel so blessed, to I raised one on my own, but to B, find my firstborn son, and to now develop this wonderful, wonderful relationship that I'm developing with him, in the last 5 years. And like I said, I spent my first Mother's Day with him, and it was just absolutely wonderful. And I plan on spending many, many more and being totally involved with his life. And we are, Mum, he's my son. He's definitely my son. There's no doubt about it.
Well, we'd like to take this opportunity of wishing your son a happy birthday. He's going to be, it's his birthday in 1 day in Australia, 2 days here in the United States and Canada.
No, Saturday your time.
Saturday my time.
Yes, the 14th, tomorrow your time.
All right, tomorrow's the 13th here.
Oh.
You see, it's the 12th today here.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. But that's right. It'll be aired, though, right?
It's going to be aired. Well, yeah. So happy birthday, Steve, from everybody here at the X Zone. We've got about a minute left. What would you like to tell people who want to start to search for someone that they would like to get back into their life?
Well, look, there's a lot of areas that you can go to now. There are websites. They can also contact the television stations, Find My Family. They are doing a wonderful job. Jack Thompson, who started the show here in Australia, he actually was adopted himself. He found out at a later age that he was adopted, and he found his birth parents. So he now has made it his journey, I suppose you'd call it, to unite people, and they're doing this through the television shows. And I believe you have one in the US, and I'm not sure about Canada. And you can apply to through that television station, that company, Find My Family, and they will actually try and help you find your family and reunite people. But look, there's people now, there's private investigators that are specializing in that area. You can actually do searches on people if you have any information yourself now.
Anyway, Lori, we've just run out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Lori Cartagena has been my guest this hour, X-Zone Nation. Her book is entitled, all right, do you have your pencils and paper ready, gang? Okay, because I'm going to repeat it for the last time. The Heartbreak Option, an inspiring true story. It's available at Amazon.com. Well, that's it for tonight. I'd like to thank all my affiliates around the world, my producer Craig on the other side of the glass, and of course my lovely wife and senior producer Laura Rogers for all her hard work and dedication. And she's also a great cook. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. So until tomorrow night, love your children. They're the leaders of tomorrow. And always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night now.
I know